Boom. What is up, everybody? We're about to get into a special one. It's me, J Rod, the filmmaker, former film major, frequent fighting gamer from Philadelphia, and I believe we are back with. Oh, let me move this do-rag. All right, there we go. And I believe we are back with another episode of First and Final. Now, I say I believe because, I could not feel like waiting until the entire First and Final and just drop this trailer reaction, but I think I'm gonna wait because I'm honestly with this, I'm more interested in what my final thoughts are going to be of this series than my first reaction. My first reaction, I think, is going to be like, this is cool, I'm a bit confused, but I think the execution is going to be the most important thing for this one. So we're not going to waste too much time. You guys clicked on it. You saw the thumbnail. You saw the title. You know what we're about to react to. The trailer for X-Men 97. If you have no idea what that is, there was an X-Men animated show that came out in the 90s, around 97 probably. And that show obviously got canceled since then. And so obviously the show is no longer with us. But they are coming out with a reboot or spiritual successor of this show coming to Disney Plus. So it's getting like rebooted as everything does. And it's interesting because we're in a much different era for Marvel, for animation, for streaming. And they decided to go back and continue a story that, I think a lot of us thought was just lost, was just done, was just over. And it's becoming a theme of Disney Plus. I think they're doing a similar thing with the new Daredevil series, the new Daredevil Born Again series that's coming out. They've been doing it with the Netflix Marvel stuff, and the way that they decided to use it here and there. And also, we're going to get into the full phase where the actual X-Men characters are coming into the MCU. I don't know if you've seen the Marvels, but there was a huge X-Men spoiler or teaser or whatever for that post-credit scene. If you haven't, check out my First and Final video on the Marvels where I do talk about it. And then I also just recently reacted to the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer. So that's another way that the X-Men universe, the 20th Century Fox universe and everything is starting to blend together into one universe in the MCU. Obviously, nobody told the Sony universe, and they are still trying to make something of these terrible movies.
He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
But we're going to get into it right now with the X-Men 97 trailer. I already have it up. It dropped yesterday, so I've been excited to see what's going on in this. How does it look? Anything and everything about this series I'm excited to get into. Like I said, I'm excited. I'm curious. And also, I'm not someone who actually hates reboots. I actually kind of like reboots for certain things. I just recently finished the Mr. and Mrs. Smith reboot, and I liked it. I thought I liked this version of it more than I think I liked the original because it actually gets into some details, and it has a show format, and it has a director and creator, Donald Glover, who I already like, and I already enjoy his directorial style and his writing style. So, yeah, maybe this is going to be similar. Where there are some MCU creators that have a good mind for this stuff. There are good writers and good directors, so maybe they cooked here, maybe they didn't. We shall see. But let's get into it without further ado.
Next Saturday morning. Check your local listings.
I'm grateful to
Interesting choice
to say goodbye.
to do the Fatback TV.
Proud of you all, my X-Men.
Fate lies in our hands now.
I could rewatch this show, to be completely honest. I know it was a pretty dense one. It was a pretty... Oh, okay. Also, the animation style is gonna really matter.
To stay vigilant.
But honestly, it looks good so far. I like it. Like, it looks like it's somewhere in between modern animation and that classic style.
In each other.
I mean, just off of visuals, yeah, I like it more than I actually thought I would.
We get this done by working together as a team.
Jeez, Stub, keep buzzing in my ear.
It's too early to say they sold me because we don't know anything about what's going on, but visually, I'm actually really into this. Oh, look at that. And then we're gonna get scenes like this that literally were not even possible when the original show was out. Cyclops kind of overrated in my opinion, but
Magneto.
The last
yo.
will and testament of Charles Xavier.
okay, so it does
Everything he
continue the
built
story.
now belongs to me.
Interesting storyline. I think I like where they're going with this one. Surprisingly, I liked it. I liked everything about it. And like I said, it's gonna be, the execution is still gonna be very important, and how they finish is going to be more important than how they start off, right? But damn, they kind of won me over on that. I'm not gonna lie. A similar thing happened in my Deadpool reaction where I'm like, it's been a while since we had Deadpool. I don't know if they can still pull it off in the same capacity. And then the trailer was like, okay, wait, the trailer is pretty good. And I feel like it's been a while since we've gotten really good trailers. But no, they kind of knocked it out the park with this one. The only things it had to convince me of, honestly, was the animation style, that it felt enough like the old stuff while still having a lot, completely different, like shading, lighting, animation process, like just a host of new tools that they couldn't use back in the day. Fabric simulations, hair simulations, stuff like that. It still does feel like classic cartoons so far, and it has that like updated look to it. It's gonna have an updated frame rate most likely, and it's gonna have an updated feel, and the action scenes. Okay, buddy. The action scenes and the special effects is what I'm really, really excited to see, because that is something, like I said, that they couldn't really do in the original series. And it looks interesting. Now, here's the one thing that I don't want them to drop the ball on. And this is what's been lacking from a lot of the X-Men movies. And it's not really anyone's fault particularly, but it's harder to do in a movie where it's easier to do in a series. I want a lot of really casual, cozy, and personal moments with the X-Men characters. Maybe it sounds cheesy, maybe it sounds goofy, but the thing that none of the movies were able to do is really give us these personal moments of these just kids coming of age, growing up together, learning together, becoming superheroes together. It wasn't able to actually give us those personal moments. And so I'm hoping, outside of maybe, one or two here, when it focused on a single character, they could give us more character moments. But I would love to see ensemble character moments of just them living and learning life lessons, because that was in the original series, like Jean Grey trying to learn how to cook, and Gambit telling her that it tastes awful, them going to classes, them growing up together, just being kids. That's what has honestly been missing from a lot of the X-Men stuff, is allowing the kids to be kids and allowing the X-Men, the students, the children, to actually lead the story, where usually they're just background characters to Professor X and Magneto's thing, or Cyclops, Wolverine, and Jean Grey's thing. I want a lot more just personal stories with these characters, and treat them like characters, allow them to grow and develop and to experience different things. Just because Wolverine is, bub, tough as nails, hard as rocks, he can still go and enjoy some cookies or go play some basketball with the rest of the students. Something simple as that really would go a long way, when we've had enough of the super cool tough guy moments. We've seen it all. So I think that's a way that they can stay true to the original and also pivot from the last few years of X-Men stuff that has come since. But that is not even going to be the end of this. That's just my first reaction. Like I said, the execution is the most important, and because of that, my final review of this is going to be very important. So I'm going to pass it over to myself in the future. I think one of these mutants that I brought home with me actually has time travel powers. So I'm not going to experiment with any technology. I'm just going to... Well, which one of you is it? Because if we use the wrong one, I can teleport or levitate or incinerate. All right, I think it's this one. I think this kid knows how to do the time travel thing. So I'll be right back, and the next time you see me, I will have already seen the entire series for X-Men 97, and I will tell you guys what I think. Is it good? Is it bad? Who knows? Only the future knows. Oh man, all right. Thanks, fellas. I mean, time travel's supposed to be instant, right? We ended up going to the wrong location several times, and then I just finally made it back so that now I can finally review the full series for X-Men 97. Yeah, I decided, there's two people on the team who know time travel, right? So I'm like, Cable, Bishop, hook me up, take me to the day when the show is over, I'll binge watch it and I'll review it all in one day. Next thing I know, we're doing Days of Future Past. We're in the back. We're seeing Apocalypse be born. It's weird. They definitely messed up. They told me that they knew what they were doing, and apparently they have no idea. Apparently time travel is just random. They just go boop, 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 and then wherever they come out, they come out. I mean, Cable told me that sometimes he just stays in a dimension for a decade because he came there 10 years early. Like, it's just stupid. But either way, I am here. I have finally seen the entire series of X-Men 97, and we are going to review it right now, starting off with my spoiler-free thoughts, then my spoiler thoughts, including a brief, little bit of how I felt about each episode, and then we are going to wrap it up for our final review, our final thoughts of X-Men 97. So to start off, before we get into it, in my first reaction, I said that, man, I kind of want to go back and rewatch the X-Men animated series. And I did go back and watch the X-Men animated series right before I started watching X-Men 97. Like, I literally finished the animated series like the day after X-Men 97 debuted. So I even got to the show a little bit late. But I think it was worth it because now I have a really good idea of where the show started and a good benchmark for it. And it'll definitely help me with this review. I've seen, a little bit of X-Men in the past. I mean, maybe even seen the whole thing. But y'all know how it was back in the day with the Saturday morning cartoons. You just caught whatever episode was on. You weren't really able to come back, week after week and catch the entire show chronologically. So I think this is my first time ever watching X-Men the animated series chronologically. And it's really good. It's a lot better than I thought. It ages really well. And I'm pretty sure that's the reason why they decided to reboot or adapt into X-Men 97. It's such a good story. It has a lot of great characters and great character moments. And it's pretty dense. Like I said, there's a lot of episodes of the original X-Men animated series. I mean, obviously, X-Men 97 just started, so there's not as many episodes. But it did an amazing job continuing the legacy of X-Men animated series. So we're going to talk about what they did that was different, but we're also going to talk about what they did that was the same, that helps embody the original X-Men animated series. I'm going to give you guys my full review, and then we're going to get out of here. So let's get right into it, starting off with the spoiler-free thoughts of the entire series of X-Men 97. So if you haven't seen it, don't worry, I'm not going to spoil it yet. And when I do, I'll give you guys the spoiler warning. But my spoiler-free thoughts, as I said, this show, I was anticipating it being good when I saw that trailer. I like the animation style, and I like the original series. So I'm like, okay, I think it's going to be pretty good. This show was great. This show was better than I ever expected it to be. It was so good, week after week. Obviously, there were some weeks that were a lot less interesting, but every show like this these days has their filler episodes. And not even that it's filler episodes, but it can't just be on 10 every single week. Sometimes it needs those lows to help bring you back up to the highs. So I do get why it has some what you would call filler episodes or some slower episodes. But then again, in my first reaction, I personally asked for moments like the one you see above with everyone in their basketball outfits. I just want the team together chilling and having these personal character moments with each other, developing and learning about each other. And everything didn't have to be like a extra dimensional fight with a supervillain. I just wanted those few moments where they're just trying to be a family, they're trying to be a team, where they're just trying to, learn each other and be better for each other. And this show definitely had a lot of those type of moments. Most of them were relationship moments. So obviously you guys know that this, no spoilers in this part, but that Jean Grey and Scott are a famous couple in the X-Men. Also, Gambit and Rogue are a famous couple in the X-Men. There are a few new couples on this team, but that was basically how we got these character moments. And then also, let's say that two of these characters were also trying to start a family. And so that was another character moment, not just between the two characters, but then there was also Jean Grey and Storm having a lot of good character moments between each other, leaning on each other. and developing that friendship. One thing I was actually surprised about, there's not really any more beef between Wolverine and Cyclops. Yes, Wolverine will probably still steal Jean Grey at, the first opportunity, but he doesn't really talk about it that much. I think he's moved on, and we'll talk more about that when we get into spoilers. But I thought that, there were some great episodes in this show. It was a lot more dramatic and action-packed than I expected it to be. That was one thing where I think the original X-Men animated series, it's amazing for story, and it has some great arcs. But the action, they couldn't do too much with the action. They did as good as they could at the time with their skills and their hand-drawn animation. This reboot series definitely gave them a lot more opportunities to do more with special effects, with action. Some really cool fight scenes between these characters. Some really cool character power moments between these characters, including like the combo move that you saw with Gambit and Wolverine in the trailer. There is the external conflict of the show, and I thought that was great, and I thought it was pretty good. But I think that the internal conflicts are there too, and that if this story arc, this villain in this arc isn't your favorite, I think there's still a lot to cling on to with those internal conflicts. You really just need one character that you see yourself in or that you love, and you could follow that one character throughout the story because they do a good job of including everyone, bouncing back and forth from everyone on the team. How does this story affect this character? Now, how does it affect this character? How does it affect that character? So, yeah, I thought it was great in all of those aspects as far as balancing the huge ensemble cast, as far as giving us a bunch of really good stories, both internal and external conflicts. And I also thought it did a good job of like giving some more character spotlights. I think my favorite X-Men character of all time might be Nightcrawler, and Nightcrawler is not a huge part of X-Men the animated series. He's not even a huge part of X-Men 97 either, but he does get an episode or two to really show off and to do some really cool stuff. So while he's not in every single episode, the episodes that he's in, he really does make an impact on those episodes. Really cool scenes, like whatever. Not gonna spoil it yet, but and then I think on the main team, while I was watching X-Men animated series, I started to realize that I love Rogue. I'm a huge fan of Rogue, and going into X-Men 97, I still love Rogue. I love how they write Rogue. I love what she gets to do in the show. My only real problem with her is that she's always like flying brick, right? Like her default powers are strength and flying, and that's mostly what she does in the series. She's a lot like a Superman character, even though we know Rogue has she can steal people's life essence, she can take people's powers with her touch. I know that she doesn't want to do that to any of her allies because she might risk hurting them, but come on, Rogue could pull up on a villain and just kind of grab their face. We didn't really get any scenes like that throughout the series. It was just Rogue being that strong flying character, which she did a great job with that power set. But I would like to see her do more because Rogue can do so much more. Like, she could literally take someone else's powers and use them against her. I wanted to see more of that. But I don't know. I think the last thing I will say, it was a great story arc. The reason why I'm so impressed with it is because I had no idea where they were going with the story, what villain they were going to be using, and how they were going to, go through it and end it. And I was really impressed, especially with, the conflict, especially with the... Oh, damn, I'm losing the word. With the main, climax of the story, whenever it got to a really big story moment or action scene, I was definitely drawn back in. I could not look away. And I think that a goal of this show was to make us all feel like kids watching Saturday morning cartoons again. And it might be a different moment for everyone, but I think everyone does have a moment watching the show where you feel like a kid again watching those Saturday morning cartoons. So in that sense and in other senses, I think the show really did succeed. But I'm going to get into spoilers now, talk more about the episodes, and then we're going to wrap it up. So, guys, this is your official spoiler warning. Listen out for it. Y'all hear that? Hear that X-Men alarm? To me, my X-Men, spoilers are coming. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Give him the forecast.
So starting off with the pilot, To Me, My X-Men. This one is mostly just about establishing, but at the same time, since it picks up right after X-Men the animated series, it doesn't need a lot of exposition. It doesn't need to tell us who these characters are. It doesn't even really need to tell us what they're doing. It just tells us, you know, Professor X is gone. They're trying to pick up the pieces. And then in walks in Magneto, who, according to Charles' last will and testament, is now the leader of the team, the owner of the mansion and the X-Men, which, you know, is a great start to the conflict because who would have expected that? Yeah, like I said, there's not a lot of exposition here. It is basically just getting back into the fray, back into these characters' lives. The shot that's behind me, this background, is from that episode where the characters were kind of chilling, having fun, enjoying life as much as they can. Then they get an alarm and realize Magneto is inside the mansion. But in this episode, I think the most important part is that Magneto turns from one of their biggest villains into their leader, now one of their biggest allies. And that really is important going into the end of the series. And also, there's some pretty good action scenes. They're fighting Sentinels, which they fight Sentinels all throughout the original animated series. That's another thing about the animated series arcs and villains. They kind of just kept showing up. Like, they wouldn't introduce a lot of new villains in the animated series. You would get Master Mold and the Sentinels. You would get Sinister. You would get Apocalypse. And then those characters would just keep showing up throughout the story. Like, once you thought they were gone for some time, boom, they pop right back up. So I wasn't surprised to see Sentinels here, but at some point I'm like, damn, y'all, like, when are we gonna get rid of the Sentinels? We blew up Master Mold, we went in the future and in the past, and there's still Sentinels. But either way, the first episode is pretty mild. It's not the most memorable, but it is the pilot, so you got to get into it in order to get back into the story and figure out where we are in the story. Next up is Mutant Liberation Begins. This one, the only thing I really remember about this episode is Executioner. They introduced Executioner, which is supposed to be like kind of a supremacist character who hates mutants, and he'll try to kill them and execute them in public. Now, while I'm not on the anti-mutant supremacist team, one thing I did like about Executioner is he beat up Scott Summers for a little bit. And I don't like Cyclops. I've never been a fan of Cyclops. So seeing him get beat up, hey, I liked it. I was with it. And, you know, people were kind of torn on this. There was a lot of discussion about this episode because it's like, you know, a lot of times people agree with the villains or the supremacist characters and they don't see the irony of you're not supposed to like that character. You're not supposed to want to be that character because that character is evil. But in this one case, I looked away. I made an exception because I like seeing Scott Summers. All right, so this episode is about the mutants trying to be more visible and work with like the UN and the government, and then the Friends of Humanity taking a strike against them to try to make them look like the bad guys or make them do something in public that'll make them look like the bad guys. Pretty classic episode here. I mean, it's just like the humans who don't want progress versus the mutants who are trying to progress. And so pretty classic setup, but it did make for a really good episode. And I think that, you know, the best part about this is just the fights. It's just the X-Men get to take on Friends of Humanity. Magneto kind of ends the fight in a really dramatic way. And yeah, so it's a pretty good episode that puts the X-Men on the map in a big way. Next up is Firemate Flesh. So then this is the episode that I mentioned earlier where it does the Madeline Pryor Jean Grey saga. The part that I was hinting at earlier but didn't want to spoil is talking about the Cyclops, Jean Grey, Madeline Pryor, and Nathan Summers arc. And it's honestly probably the biggest like personal moment in the entire series, is dealing with first Scott and Jean Grey want to leave the team and start their own family together. They believe Jean is pregnant. Jean has a baby. And then it turns out Jean is not Jean. And they go through this whole arc of, is that baby their baby? We know that baby grows up to be Cable. So honestly, it's even more complicated when Cable shows up in the actual story as an adult. But yeah, that's probably the biggest personal arc because it does go throughout multiple episodes and it does impact the story going forward. But once Jean Grey has the baby, it's then revealed that Jean Grey is not Jean Grey and that she's Madeline Pryor, a clone made by Sinister, and that the real Jean Grey was still captured. That honestly was the craziest part for me, is that like as soon, I mean, I know the Madeline Pryor arc a bit, you know, from the comics, but the fact that as soon as she had this baby, it just comes out that, yeah, so actually, Jean Grey hasn't actually been here for years. It's just been her clone. Jean Grey is still captured. Like, I think they're implying that she was captured from the original series and never properly recovered. which I find insane. Like, that's kind of crazy. I don't think they actually talked enough about that, but because of their situation, the powers, the fact that there are now 2 genes, they have other things to deal with, and the fact that Sinister was trying to steal the baby. I think it was a lot. It was definitely a lot in this episode, so I get why they didn't really get into the moral questions of it. But that's a lot like, a comic book or a superhero series would, especially the X-Men animated series. They used to just do stuff, not explain it, and then move on to another arc in the very next episode. But what was really cool about this episode is there was a lot of psychological horror type animation in this, where, was it Madeline Pryor that was doing all of these things? I don't remember, but they kind of like someone completely took the mansion and made it like an astral plane sort of zone with these different characters popping in. Some of them were Morph, and sometimes in the series Morph shows up just to shapeshift into another character and give us a cameo from someone who we didn't expect to see. But this was a pretty cool. I did like the little horror elements that they tried to put in this episode. That made this episode really stand apart from the rest of the show. Skews a bit dark, skews a bit creepy, but it was a really good story at the end of the day. So Fire Made Flesh, that was a great one. I got tired of Jean Grey arcs in the original series. Like, how many times is she going to die and come back? How many times are we going to care about the Phoenix? But this one was pretty good. This one seemed a bit fresh while still being a bit familiar, and I liked Fire Made Flesh. Next up, episode 4 is Motendo. Now, I say, well, it's Motendo, but it's also, I think, Life After Death Part 1. So like a 2-part episode. But Motendo, I really liked. I think this episode feels the most like the original series. This episode, but then also episode 2 with the Mutant Liberation. But this is a Mojo episode. It's kind of like a little self-contained story of Jubilee and a new X-Men on the team, Sunspot, who are getting closer. They get a friendship, and then they get into a relationship. But in this episode, they just want to chill and play some video games, and little do they know they get sucked into the video game where Mojo is there, and he's trying to use them for ratings, because ratings makes Mojo big and strong and fat and whatever. So I like the Mojo callback, because I thought that was an interesting character from the original series, and I loved how they changed his thing, because I'm pretty sure it was like a TV show originally, and he puts the characters on a TV show to get ratings. Now it's a video game that you get sucked into. Really cool, and I just loved how light and fun this episode was. It was a really fun idea. It was a really light, and it was kind of a detour from the overarching story. But I love that, because that reminded me so much of the original animated series. Also, they did include a character named Abyssa, who is supposed to be like an alternate universe version of Jubilee, and Abyssa is actually voiced by the original voice actress for Jubilee, which I thought was a really cool little touch. It was like the original animated series Jubilee talking to the new X-Men 97 Jubilee and giving her advice. So that was a really cool little callback. But then episode 5, known as Remember It, is probably the most funny, interesting name, because it's probably the most memorable episode in the entire series. It is probably the big one, the one that everyone was waiting for. And personally, after watching episode 4, I didn't think that they set up a huge episode like this. So going into episode 5, I was expecting something pretty normal. It starts off with a lot of relationship drama, a lot of romantic arc drama between Gambit and Rogue, but also between Rogue and Magneto. It was an interesting way to start the episode, caught me off guard, but this one kept me glued to the TV. I was just confused, like, what is going on? So much is happening. Things are progressing very fast, and then before you know it, all that romantic arc drama is gone, and we're back into action, and one of the biggest action scenes of the entire series. It has some insane implications, which, since we're in the spoiler territory, I can say they killed off Gambit, bro. They literally took Rogue away from Gambit and tried to put her together with Magneto. She decided that, nah, I don't think this is for me. And before she could go back to Gambit, they killed that man off. It was insane. So there was a bit of heartbreak there. There was obviously the loss of losing Gambit, and then at the same time, his the way he died was an amazing sacrifice A bunch of other mutants get killed in the scuffle, but because of Gambit, a lot of mutants are saved in the scuffle. So it's like you gotta respect the sacrifice. I think any of the X-Men probably would have done it, but why did they have to kill off Gambit, bro? Scott Summers is right there. Cyclops is right there. He could have died in the same exact way, bro. Real big eye laser kamikaze as the evil, ugly Sentinel stabs him. It should have been Scott. It should have been Scott. I'm gonna say that. But either way, it's a huge like character moment. It's a huge arc. It's a huge action moment for the series. It's probably just the biggest moment in the entire show. Sets up the final arc of the series. And we lost Gambit, like I said. But it's a great episode. It is probably the best episode of the series. So if you just want to watch one that has it all, you're going to want to watch episode 5 called Remember It. This is the big one. And it's probably going to be the one, like I've heard that they're vying for some awards in the next award season. They're looking at, you know, getting some animated series awards, but maybe even some drama awards. And Remember It is going to be that episode that I think gets them the accolades and the awards that they're looking for. But then next up, so then episode 6, which is Life After Death Part 2. This episode was actually a bit of a detour for me. It's very slow. It's very, it's just a lot slower and a lot more heartfelt and emotional. And it was an interesting way to follow up one of the biggest action-packed episodes to go then into a very calm and contemplative episode like Life After Death. There is an arc here where Storm loses her powers so that she's going on a like self-discovery journey to try to get her powers back along with Forge. So this is another like personal relationship. You get to learn the characters and watch them become closer to each other. But my only problem is it came right after the most like interesting and action-packed episode of the season. I kind of wish that they would have put this one, because this is Life After Death Part 2. I wish they would have put this after episode 4. And then we would have got episode 5 straight into episode 7. But speaking of episode 7, it's called Bright Eyes. This is a really good episode, mostly about Rogue and Rogue dealing with the loss of Gambit and trying to get retaliation for the loss of Gambit. So she's kind of going, I mean, no pun intended, but she's kind of going rogue in this episode. She's trying to get information any way she can. She's looking up old villains and contacts, and she even runs into Captain America at one point. And not only that, but she says, Captain America, hey, if you're not going to help me, why don't you let me use this shield here? Because I'm going to do what I need to do to bring people to justice behind the death of Gambit, the death of Remy, who is her share, her amour. So yeah, I thought that this made perfect sense, you know, Rogue having a bit of a vengeance streak after the death of Gambit. And the way that they did it was pretty good. This is a really interesting episode, and the way it ends really marks off the final arc and the Human Sentinel arc. So Rogue actually goes so far that she is going to kill Trask because of what happened with the Sentinel on Genosha, the Sentinel that killed Gambit. She's willing to kill Trask. And she basically does, throws his ass off of a building.
Wait! What? If we kill him, then we're no better than the villains. Okay. I don't give a fuck.
But when she does, it's turned out that he is a human Sentinel, and he comes back as this like Frankenstein's monster, Oppenheimer's bomb sort of concoction, this just pure evil incarnate. And that starts off the next arc of Bastion and the Human Sentinels versus the mutants, which this arc is so good. So the next 3 episodes are Tolerance is Extinction, Part 1, 2, and 3. And this is the final arc. But so much stuff happens in this final arc. Magneto was captured after the Battle of Genosha. He was presumed dead, but he was actually captured and maybe tortured, or maybe him and Bastion was doing some freaky stuff. So Magneto basically gets to break out and return, I think by the end of this episode, or is that the next episode? Also, Charles Xavier returns at the end of this episode, also presumed dead. This man was just in space hanging out with the space people. And then he returns like kind of out of nowhere, says, hey, X-Men, what's up? Everybody show up. Let's make a plan and let's take out these Sentinels. It's unclear to me what exactly brings Charles back to Earth. I think it's Gambit's death. I think he has a vision and that vision basically tells him about Gambit's death, and that makes him feel guilty and makes him want to return to the Xavier Mansion in a spaceship, which he does. But at the same time that this is happening, the human Sentinels are powering up everywhere, because there's so like everyone is like a human Sentinel sleeper agent that they didn't know about. And I thought that this scene where they're all taking on human Sentinels, it's so good. This is probably another one of my favorite just action scenes in the entire thing. The human Sentinels are really creepy. They seem really powerful, and it's almost like a zombie outbreak in the X-Men universe. Like, Sentinels are already established as these powerful threats, but I think going from the original Sentinels to the human Sentinels does add a bit of just creepiness factor. They seem a lot stronger than the original Sentinels, so it adds a lot of, it raises the stakes on the X-Men. And then also they're civilians. They're innocent people who are kind of just brainwashed and co-opted for this cause. So the X-Men can't just kill everybody. They kind of have a duty to protect the people who are currently swarming them and attacking them. This is where, like I said, Nightcrawler is probably my favorite character. And they give Nightcrawler and Wolverine just a really sick fight scene. Them two in the mansion taking on the human Sentinels. It's so good, I could rewatch it right now. And I loved it. That's probably my favorite part of this episode, but it ends with Charles returning in his spaceship. Then going into the next episode, a lot happens in this one as well. Charles gets the team back together. Magneto actually stops the human Sentinel attack after he escapes from Bastion's prison. And he's kind of on a similar vengeance path that Rogue is on. He's maybe even on a worse vengeance path after being tortured and kidnapped, and all the mutants that died on Genosha that he witnessed and that he couldn't protect. So Magneto's like, I'm gonna go kill him. And Charles shows back up and he's like, Magneto, you can't kill him. And Magneto's like, no, I'm gonna kill him. And he's like, no, you can't kill him. So then we get back into a classic Charles versus Magneto. Who knows best? Obviously an analog to like Martin Luther King and his nonviolent strategy versus Malcolm X and his by any means strategy. Those are definitely analogs that, they wrote the characters after a long time ago. But it's a timeless battle for these two characters. Like, they did it so much in the original series, they're gonna do it a bunch in X-Men 97. But the stakes get so high so fast. Like, in the beginning, it seems like they're just trying to stop Magneto from, killing everybody or, taking his revenge. But then Wolverine just stabs the guy. Wolverine, I know bro has no chill, but a couple questions is why is Wolverine going out stabbing people? I didn't know they were on lethal. I thought they were trying to take him out non-lethal and have him see the error of his ways or whatever. And then why is Wolverine going one-on-one with Magneto? There's so many smart people on this team, bro. I think Beast should have been like, actually, Wolverine, your bones are made of metal. You should not fight him. Damn near, you shouldn't have even come on this mission. And so Magneto does what anyone would expect Magneto to do, and he pulls the bones out of Wolverine's body. Because he's like, oh, you want to stab me? Well, I'm taking your metal. And he does. He pulls the bones out. It's crazy. I thought that it was possible that Wolverine died there, but he didn't die, so that's good. I don't think they put the metal back, so part of me thinks that, I don't know where the adamantium is. Maybe I missed what they did with it. But maybe when Wolverine recovers, he's going to have a bone claw situation once again. But that is basically, like, Wolverine getting deboned is how that episode ends. And then we go right into the finale after this. So the fight, the intellectual fight, but also the actual real life fight between Magneto and Charles continues on in the next episode. They take it into the astral plane. Charles's favorite move is like, okay, you don't want to listen to me? Well, I'll leave you catatonic and we'll talk inside your mind, which I think is kind of unethical. But at the same time, the rest of the X-Men are trying to take out Bastion. And when Asteroid M starts falling out the sky, they're trying to prevent it from crashing into Earth. And, they're the X-Men. So despite everything that goes on, they do get it done in the end. Well, they don't really take out Bastion. Their plan... Look, this is why I hate Cyclops, bro. Cyclops gets on my nerves. Cyclops' brilliant plan at the end of the day was, hey, let's stop fighting him. And let's accept him. let's love him and let's give him a place on the team. This doesn't work. I want to keep in mind that this does not work. They go for this. Maybe it distracts him for a couple minutes, but he's like, no, screw that. I still want to blow up the Earth. And I think the only reason they beat Bastion is because the entire asteroid starts to fall apart and he gets like sucked out into space. That's what I remember. I could be wrong, but that is pretty much how it went. Then Charles convinces Magneto. Charles basically broke both of their minds, and then they had to explain to each other who each other was to remember their past. And then once they did that, they could snap out of the catatonic state and help the X-Men keep Asteroid M from falling out of the sky. I said that I wasn't going to recount the entire plot, but it's so fun that I actually am enjoying recounting the entire plot. But anyway, they save the entire world. Magneto pulls Asteroid M out of, from falling back into orbit, back into space. And there's a bunch of really cool cameos in this episode and the episode before. We get to see Iron Man and Captain America. We get to see Spider-Man for a minute. We get to see Doctor Strange, Daredevil even. This is one of my favorite parts because none of these cameos actually affect the story, but I just loved seeing all of those characters pop up. You get to see what they're doing at the time and how they're impacted by the X-Men story, which I just love that kind of non-invasive, non-interference type of like, the X-Men is dealing with the X-Men story, but Cap and Iron Man and them, they got to deal with their own thing, so they can't really interfere. I would love to see them interfere more in season 2, but I do also love watching them just witness it as if they're any other person in the universe. But then when we think that everything is solved, Asteroid M keeps from falling out of the sky, it's then kind of teleported and it just kind of disappears, and no one knows where the main X-Men team go after this. But literally, the entire main team just gets blooped. Like, the majority of the cast of the X-Men are all just disappeared in this one instance. And then it showed off that where they went is they went throughout time. Different places throughout time as well. Some of them went to the future. Some of them went to the past. Some of them went to, like, early Apocalypse. And some of them went to the distant future. So I guess that's them setting up for the next arc. And honestly, this is another scenario that feels a lot like the original series. How the characters would just kind of get blooped to Savage Land. Now they're getting blooped throughout time. And this is a pretty good setup for season 2 and whatever is to come next. But then there's also a post-credit scene where I believe it's Apocalypse. And he goes to Genosha and he finds one of Gambit's cards. So maybe Gambit will be resurrected in season 2 as one of the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Personally, I would love that because I just want Gambit back. I don't care what we have to do to get him back. I just want Gambit back because I mean, how many times did Jean Grey die in the original series? Like 5, 6, and she still got to come back. So I definitely want Gambit to come back. And shoot, if we need someone to be dead, Cyclops is right there. Cyclops is right there, bro. Just kill Scott and bring somebody else in. But that is going to be it. I definitely got the more I got closer to the end, the more detail I got into, and I definitely started just talking about every single plot point there. But all that to say that X-Men 97 was just so good. A lot of story arcs going on, a lot of great writing, a lot of great animation. I don't know if I even talked that much about that. The animation is amazing in this. It does have a much more modern feel than the original series' animation, but it's still like the models just feel exactly how they would. To me, it feels like the same show with the updated graphics and technology. So I think that this new animation style is kind of just the natural evolution of the original hand-drawn animation style. If they were going for that like original hand-drawn, this show would just take so much more time, effort, money. So I am glad that, technology has advanced to the point where this is a bit easier to accomplish. And it doesn't miss out on anything. It doesn't skip a beat from the original series. It doesn't miss anything from the original series. In my opinion, it is a great spiritual successor. And even more than that, it's a sequel. It just feels like it picks right up where that last series left off. And I'm very fortunate, I'm very grateful to Beau DeMaio and to Marvel Animation for this show because, like I said in my original reaction, I didn't know that this was something I needed, but now that I have it, I'm glad that I do. I definitely needed it. Now I can confirm. But that is it for all my thoughts on X-Men 97. You guys got my first trailer reaction Now my final thoughts, spoiler free and spoiler filled on every single episode, and the overall Too Long Didn't Read about this show, because I think it's really good. I think everyone should check it out, regardless of how you feel about Marvel shows and animation. This is going to be better than you expected. This is so good. It's better than a lot of the recent Marvel stuff we've got, and that's live action and animation. Like this, I liked What If. I thought What If was such a cool idea, but this show blows What If out of the water. And now that we know what's possible through Marvel animation, I just can't wait to see where we go next and what other projects are coming that have, you know, a similar feel, similar writing, and similar inspiration. But I've been talking for quite some time, so that is going to be it. I'm going to end off here, and that's going to be my full reaction and review of X-Men 97 for a first and final. I don't know if I mentioned this, but when I first reacted to it, I thought this whole series was going to come out at once and I'll be able to binge watch it, and that this review would come out in March. But that is not the case. They dropped it weekly, and this review didn't come out until May when the entire show was done. But I'm glad that they dropped it weekly because it was such a fun experience, you know, everybody watching the show together. And like when episode 5, you know, dropped, everyone was talking about those moments together, and then the finale, everyone was talking about it together. And I just love that. I love how we are all back in our rooms as little kids watching these Saturday morning cartoons. Doesn't even come on Saturday. It comes on Wednesday. But it still just has that same feel. And I'm grateful for it. Yeah, I feel really good. Makes me feel really youthful and inspired again. But that is going to be it for this episode of First and Final for X-Men 97. But this isn't going to be the last First and Final because we've already shot first reactions for a bunch of stuff, including Deadpool and Wolverine. So this isn't even going to be our last First and Final with Wolverine in it for the year. But guys, do me a favor before we get out of here, and boom, I need you to hit me with the 3-hit combo. I need you to smash the like button like Beast, spear the subscribe button like Wolverine, and kick the notification bell like Morph. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this one, you guys. So tell me how you felt about X-Men 97 if you have seen it already. But if you haven't seen it, go ahead and check it out, because I think you guys will like it, and then come back and tell me your final thoughts. But that's gonna be it for this one. I'll see you in another one. See you guys next time. Peace out. Oh, she must be OSS. She's getting packed out. They're burning all, bro.
You are still a frog in a well who knows nothing of the sea.
Oh, is that
The ocean is filled
Yasuke?
with new ships.